So, I was recently re-listening to the extraordinary story of Dr. Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, who has overseen the development of the first COVID-19 vaccine approved for emergency use by the FDA. I first noticed this particular interview with Dr. Bourla because it focused on his family's Jewish heritage, and it was being conducted by Robert Krulwich, the brother of beloved CBS team member Sarah Krulwich, so my ears were already perked up. The very first question asked of Dr. Bourla was, how old is your hometown, and how long has your family been there? Dr. Bourla is a Greek Jew whose family has lived for 22 generations, around 500 years in Thessaloniki, an ancient city named for the sister of Alexander the Great, and also known as Salonika. The Jews of Salonika, and Dr. Bourla's family in particular, encompass one of the most beautiful, tragic, and unique chapters of all of Jewish history. Jews made up a minority community in Salonika over 2,000 years ago, as one of the oldest ethnic Jewish communities in existence. This is a totally singular geographic type of Judaism known as Romaniot, which has its own liturgical rites and distinct language of Judeo-Greek known as Yevanic. Following the Spanish expulsion of Jews in 1492, Salonika in particular became home to many Sephardic immigrants seeking refuge in the welcoming Ottoman Empire. By the 16th century, Salonika's population was 2/3 Jewish, a clear majority. It was a center of Judeo-Spanish culture, of Torah learning, of Jewish mysticism, and multiple Ladino newspapers. At one point, 50% of the population of Salonika spoke Ladino, the dialect of Sephardic Jewry. Sam actually taught me that it's one of the only cities in the world where non-Jewish merchants had to learn Ladino terms and phrases in order to do business in town. Jews in Salonika were part of the essential fabric of their Greek community, even fighting for Greek independence in the 1920s. But during World War II and Nazi occupation, the story of the Jews of Salonika was once again extraordinary, but this time in the scope of its tragedy. While Sephardic stories of the Shoah have risen to greater and greater prominence, especially in recent years, the Jews of Salonika, their story is not often told. The Nazi regime took over Greece in 1941, and ghettos in Salonika were established. In 1942, on a July day known as Black Shabbat, all the men of Salonika from age 18 to 45 were rounded up for forced labor. For 10 weeks they were tortured and many died, while the Jewish community tried to raise the 3.5 billion drachma sum demanded by the Nazis for their ransom. They could only raise 2 billion of that total, but to cover the rest, they agreed they would abandon the Jewish cemetery in Salonika, where approximately 500,000 people were buried. The cemetery was destroyed. The headstones were used for paving materials. Today, this is the site of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Despite this heartbreaking exchange, more than 90% of the Jews of Salonika were deported to concentration camps in Poland, mostly Auschwitz, across the whole of Central Europe. It's said that only Polish Jewry experienced a greater level of destruction than the Salonican Jewish community. By the end of the Holocaust, only 1/30, less than 2,000 Jewish residents of the original 50,000 remained. In Dr. Bourla's case, on his father's side, of those many, many relations of 22 generations dating back to the 1700s, only his father and uncles survived. His mother was the only one to carry on her family name, having been rescued from a firing squad by a bribe from her non-Jewish brother-in-law. And yet, without question, Dr. Bourla credits his work ethic, his dedication to the preservation and the elevation of life, and his deep-seated faith in the promise and the potential of humanity for goodness, to his family and community's story of survival, not destruction. Our service tonight has been woven together by love songs, whether explicitly or implicitly. In honor of Pesach, we opened with one of our most ancient love songs in Jewish tradition, the Song of Songs. Our prayers and liturgy of the Shabbat service can each be seen as a sort of love song between human and divine in reciprocal directions. Tonight, instead of the prose of a typical drasha, we will turn to a different type of love song, from which we will all learn in divrei shira, words of poetry and music. To introduce this love song of Salonican Jewry, I turn to our teacher, Joyce Rosenzweig.
Shabbat Shalom. Folk songs of any people are precious possessions that are lovingly handed down from generation to generation. Folk songs comfort us when we are afraid and carry the wisdom, imagination, and cultural values of those who came before us. The gorgeous Ladino folk song, Arvoles Lloran, Trees Are Crying, is one of the oldest, most beloved, and well-known of all Sephardic folk songs. The original song is about lovers who are separated, who dream of being reunited. The words are, trees weep for rain and mountains for air. Thus my eyes weep for you, dear beloved. Come and you will see. Come and you will see. We will see with the love which we share, we will be united. The refrain says, what will happen to me? In foreign lands I will die, obviously afraid that they may not ever see their loved one again. When the Greek Jews were sent to Auschwitz, they took their folk songs with them as a connection to their previous life and to express the inexpressible, especially when the majority of the other inmates spoke Yiddish and not Ladino. Arvoles Lloran is an example of such a folk song, which was adopted by a group of inmates in Auschwitz, known as the Coro Saloniko, and renamed In Polish Lands. This version that you will hear tonight is a lament, this time not for one's sweetheart, but for one's mother, whether it's one's actual mother or perhaps one's motherland. Instead of saying just, in foreign lands I will die, it specifically says, in Polish lands I am destined to die. The song is written in A major. You will hear it tonight in A major, a bright and hopeful key. But in reality, with all of its lyricism, there is a sense of sadness, desperation, and impending doom. May we keep telling and retelling the glorious stories of the Greek Jews and study and pass along their poetry, their songs, their stories to generations still to come as a blessing and as an inspiration forever. Arvoles Lloran.
Arvoles lloran por lluvias y montañas por aires. Ansí lloran los mis ojos por ti, que querida madre, ansí lloran los mis ojos por ti, querida madre. Torno y digo, ¿qué va a ser de mí en tierras de Polonia? Me tengo que morir. Lluvia hizo y se mojó la calle y el cortillo. Anda, decirle al mi amor que es de los ojos míos. Anda, decirle al mi amor que es de los ojos míos. Torno y digo, ¿qué va a ser de mí en tierras de Polonia? Me tengo que morir. When learning this piece, I couldn't help but think of the incredibly rich Sephardi civilization that made this music possible. And I thought of my ancestors, all of our ancestors, who sacrificed so much to retain their Jewish identity. As a student of history at JTS, the story of Salonika became dear to my heart because I see so much of us in them. I'm indebted to Joyce for bringing me this piece and introducing it to all of us. By singing these Ladino words and continuing to live and celebrate Jewish life, we honor their memories.